Uh, Good evening. Good evening. I was going to say welcome, traders. Yes, this is now, I'm recording this on Sunday, the 16th of January, and it is for the week commencing tomorrow, Monday, the 17th of January for the next week. And let's have a quick look at the fundamental concerns. So there's just ongoing, what's the kind of stuff? I mean, there's concerns, of course, globally about war outbreaking with Ukraine, US tensions, that kind of thing. But I really want to focus on the things that are most likely to impact the markets or not even, but really what people are under the impression the markets are concerned with. So US inflation, global inflation, actually, although I talk about US inflation, there is a general concern about global inflation. The US inflation is now at 7% for December, and it's on track with what's expected. Okay, so there's commentary about how it's tied together with coronavirus and quarantine and so on and so forth, and therefore once that's very much under control, then there would be reasonable to expect a dip in that, but also it's really a sign of spending. So it's also the sign of a healthy, it's the consequence of a healthy and robust economy. Okay, so there's good and bad. It's a double-edged sword. The point is, it's on track and as expected, and therefore I don't believe the market's going to react too much to it at this point in time. The S&B, any kind of concerns about any intervention from the S&B into the Swissy, no expectation on that. There's no language, there's nothing, there's no murmurs that I've heard at this point in time, but to me those are the kind of things that cause flash crashes or break the markets, and so this is why I talk about them. And then we've got the general global market bubble. At this point in time, you know what, if the economies are stable and we don't really have the same kind of defaults in terms of homes and vehicles and loans, then I'm not really that concerned at this point in time. So I know, of course, we were talking about a black swan, so if it is going to be a black swan, it's not going to be that. Most likely to me, a black swan would be something like a war breaking out or a civil war or something that's new for us. Point is, not really expecting much from that. No real concerns here. Let's have a look at the economic calendar for the week ahead. So very boring. I've included medium impact news for day traders. There's very little happening this week, except on Thursday, we've got employment change out of Australia. I beg your pardon. And then, of course, possibly crude oil inventories. That's literally it. There's no real big news. This isn't really going to be what's driving the market. So what's going to happen? The market's either going to do very, very little, or existing trends are going to continue to play out. So let's go ahead. Let's go to the charts and let's have a look and see what's going on there. So, so looking at the charts now, starting off with the VIX, again, bearish rejection candle on the Friday, the week being a little bit of an indecision candle, more of the same. Nothing super exciting at this point in time. Certainly no real trend in place. 4 hour looks like it's pretty much range bound, so not really expecting any magic from that. Moving on to the US dollar index. So we did break to the downside. I spoke about how I'm not really going to commit until I see a solid candle breaking close away from that range, which is what happened. And my, at this point, it's very nice. So we've now come back in towards 94.50. This is a really good area to produce a bit of a bullish weekly candle. If ultimately this trend is going to continue to the upside, this is what I'm looking for this week, is a small or even bullish candle. So saying that there is a possibility here, I'd have preferred for it to tap 94.50. But that's being a bit of a perfectionist, and the market doesn't really give a damn about my opinion on that. But generally this week, looking to see if these levels hold and see if they climb a little bit higher, perhaps head back up to 96, just if that is if this trend is going to continue. Could it head back? Could it continue a little bit lower? Absolutely, it could do that. It could continue down towards 94, even as far as 93. Okay, so just having a look at it here on the 4 hour, that's just simply the same. That's just the same data as the daily. Let's have a look at the euro dollar, US dollar. It broke into the upside, coming back to test potentially the outside of the range for support, or potentially looking here to test 1.14 for support. And then it's not even that unreasonable to expect this to continue up towards 1.15 or 1525, even a little bit higher. So that's quite interesting, because looking at the dollar index, there's that potential there for dollar strength, but looking at euro dollar, it actually looks more likely, or that there's a very fair case to be made for a stronger euro, weaker US dollar. Okay, sterling. Sterling is really nice and strong and healthy. I got to say that 4 hour chart is beautiful. There's some really, really clean trends on this. I'm liking the look of that price action. And at this point in time, I'm looking more for moves to the upside. Okay, we still haven't broken this weekly downtrend, so it is still technically in a downtrend, and therefore it could continue, it could reverse this week and head a little bit lower. So this is really what so far, this is where the caution is going to be. Are we going to get that fork in the road? Is the dollar going to come back strong? Alternatively, we're going to see that continued weakness. And so really the best way to know that for sure is looking at the 4 hour for the euro dollar and sterling. and looking to see if they ultimately maintain their uptrends or if they break and head into a downtrend. That would be the first clue for me. Okay, Aussie dollar, US dollar. You can see this one I was just saying last week. Very, very messy. You can even see here within the 4 hour, broke outside of the range, came back into the range. It's all over the place. Again, I'm going to stick with that, although it is climbing a little bit high. I'm going to just not rely on that for decent trading opportunities. Certainly not for swing trading opportunities. Looking here at Kiwi dollar, US dollar, also just giving some very mixed signals. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. It's been going sideways. It's a mess. Stay away from that. Okay, dollar yen, which always dances to the beat of its own drum. We do have some BOJ stuff coming up this week. However, look, there can always be surprises, but I think these guys have got everything, guys and girls have got everything very much under control. I think they kind of know where they want to go. Their inflation is nothing. I think it's about 0.4%. They don't have those same kind of issues. For them, it's really going to be about if any concerns in terms of exports impacting their economy, if anyone else outside of their export partners decide to cut back and for whatever reason. So I'm not really expecting much from this. I think there'll be intraday opportunities to the upside or the downside, and it can go either way. So going to play it as it lies would really be the way that I would approach that. Dollar Swissy here, back down at the bottom of this range. Yes, it can push all the way back up from here. We've got a little bit of a double bottom there, so it is trying to climb a little bit higher. But if you look here at the monthly, it is looking very, very weak. And therefore, if we do get a nice close lower or break below that, to break to this, just look at the monthly here. There is a fair possibility it's going to break to the downside, which supports the idea of a weaker US dollar. And finish off here with dollar CAD. Dollar CAD would be lovely to see this come back up, test this, and looking for shorting opportunities to the downside, predominantly because we appear to have quite a strong CAD, and some of the other charts have been, some of the other crosses have been showing that. And that's it. So let's have a look at some of the cross pairs of interest and take it from there. Okay, so ouch. There is really nothing going on at the moment. And with the news being the way it is, I wouldn't expect much. So look, you know, trends can kick off, they can start off, and markets can move. Even it doesn't just depend on the news. The news just can be a nice little bit of jet fuel that gets added to it, or firelighter fluid, whichever way you want to put it. It just keeps it going. So look, pound Aussie for me looking the nicest. I want to see it get above this kind of 1.9 level, push a little bit higher. We got a nice little uptrend on the daily. It's starting to break through new highs. It's closed near the end, which is not decent enough. I want to see a break through that little weekly chart looking nice and bullish. That bullish candle would have been nice if it had closed at the top as well. So it's not through there just yet. That monthly looking as though it's within reach of 1.9, 1.915, maybe a little bit higher. That's really what I want to see it get through, but it isn't there yet. It's got to break through that and continue up, and that offers very little. So there's basically just scraps. Not expecting much else from this. The rest of the charts are, there's a lot of ranging charts. So if they break out of the ranges, that'll be great. The yen pairs are not really giving any clarity. The Aussie pairs and Kiwi pairs are looking possibly a little bit weak. I keep an eye on maybe the CAD pair. So actually, this is what I'm hoping for this week, that some of those trends will actually kick off during the week, and then start to take advantage of those, but not seeing anything that I like at all. So it really means watching from the sidelines until I see some trends kick in on that, and then get involved with those. So moving on to precious metals, commodities, precious metals, gold. All right, it's trying to move higher. There was a good, nice, solid, rewarding trade to the upside this week, breaking a little bit higher. It does want to continue onwards. That's a relatively nice finish. I'm happy with that. I expect a little bit of a pullback and then a continuation. Can it get through that? You can see that monthly chart just attempting to break through that level of resistance, just try and get it through that. That's where it wants to go. The question is, can it succeed? And so that's something I'll keep an eye on. You can see that weekly, that monthly level I added in here, 1830, around about there. It's got to break through that, but that'll immediately push it up to 1870. Silver is also looking a little bit more bullish, but it's also battling with resistance here. Okay, so this weeklies to me, they don't look that bad. They're actually, and the monthlies are looking a little bit more bullish than bearish. I'm okay with that. Copper, just showing you a failed breakout attempt here, but overall you can see that the average price on the monthly, that 10 moving average, is closing a little bit high, but it's also battling with resistance. So a big boost maybe on a much weaker dollar or something like that, just to get it over the line and then help it continue. All right, so moving on to crude oils. The commodities of that ilk looking nice and bullish. It's coming back into these old highs, but overall, so far the price looks like it's set to continue to the upside. I hate it when it closes so low or so close to the recent highs that you then have to wait for it to get above that. So let's have a look at West Texas. West Texas looking good. It's got to head up towards 85. That's a nice solid weekly candle. Closing near the high would have been a very clear signal. That monthly also looking really good. You know, just looking at this in isolation, that really looks like it does genuinely want to continue to the upside. And you can see here Brent also pushing through. That was a clear signal there. It's now creating fresh highs. And that 4 hour, that's nice, good money-making opportunities over there. So all of that being, so far, being one of the clearest kind of charts with money-making opportunities here. So moving on to other commodities of interest, futures markets as well. We've got sugar, this one hitting a little bit low, but also there's a lot of buyers in this area. You could see that behavior here in the past in this area here around 18, and also just generally being sort of very sluggish to head to the downside. It just kind of finally broke through that level. It's produced a bit of a semi-bullish, weekly bullish candle. Let's call it weekly as in W-E-A-K, week. So we'll see how that goes. Coffee as well, attempting to continue, but it's got clear resistance over here. So I'm cautious. This would have done so much better with a proper correction down towards 200 and then a continuation to the upside. So again, I exercise that with a bit of caution. Wheat. Okay, so wheat is doing, I think, a nice, healthy, much-deserved correction back down to these lows. There's a level of support where it's sitting at. If it breaks through that, I'd expect it to continue down towards 700. Alternatively, if it can hold, it's going to work its way back up to the top of that range. Cotton looking very nice and bullish. Clear break through here. That's a nice, solid break. So this one, I think it's fair, it's reasonable at this time. I would have liked, again, similar to some of the others above, to have a nice correction down to 100 or further. But this one looks like it wants to keep going a little bit higher. So let's see if it manages to do that and succeeds. Okay, moving on to the global indices, starting off with the Dow, the US. Let's have a look and see how they're doing. So they are struggling with the highs here. Okay, so again, the 4-hour, there are still lots of buyers. This is on the Dow, lots of buys on levels around levels of support, which means at a very minimum range bound, attempting to push a little bit higher here. And again, so I spoke about this last week, I think it being reasonable to see drops and bounces because there are lots of buy orders as we go down, but there may be fewer and fewer buyers above these levels, and therefore the market fails to go high. And if it does that, every time it comes down, there will be fewer buyers below here. It'll drop and drop and drop and drop. So it has to kind of go up and fail, and then come down, and then potentially fail as it goes. And so that kind of makes the most sense to me. Let's have a look at the S&P. S&P also stumbling a little bit. That's a bit of a weekly indecision candle. It can turn from here, but this looks a little bit more bearish than bullish. This one looks like it might want to head a little bit low and just kind of test 4,500 again. Interesting. The 4-hour, however, is trying to boost up. Okay, so what does it tell me so far? It's telling me caution, caution, caution. There's going to be swings in multiple directions at this point in time. Nasdaq, you can see here, lots of buyers at the low here, but it is in a downtrend. Lower highs, lower lows. Nice little bullish candle there. Indecision here. That's a failure, kind of really it's closed under that level. We've got an indecision candle on here. So it's saying it really doesn't at this point in time know if it's going to be able to climb back over the level or if it's going to continue down. However, that monthly doesn't look that bad. This is a good area for it to turn around in, but it has got that strong resistance. And again, we've got that high low in the 4 hours. So I think initially, it makes sense for this to attempt to climb a little bit higher, but there is a very real possibility that we're going to get more of the same as we did last week. Russell 2000 also here, lots of buyers propping it up, but it looks like they're getting pushed down. It does see in the last little stretch of Friday, it must have pushed a little bit higher. It is coming down towards the lows here, and so if it's range bound, which it is, it could push back up a little bit higher. But again, there are times when it looks clearly bullish, times when it looks clearly bearish. Now it is looking clearly undecided and not as strong. I've seen it when it's at the bottom of the ranges and it looks like there's a bit of bullishness. Here's where it gets really interesting. Again, same as last week, leave the US, come across here to the UK, and it continued up, creating fresh highs. So as I said before, it's very unusual in the time that I've been trading the markets, which is not forever. It's 11, 12 years, somewhere around there, maybe 13, 14 years. And in that time, to me, the US market's always kind of been leading it, and it's been very rare to see the US market stumbling and to see non-US markets doing okay. And I mean generally. So that's where it gets really odd. But, sterling is looking okay. The UK economy perhaps is maybe surviving a little bit. It's not really maybe taking the same strains. That just could be because our PM is always partying when everyone else is not supposed to be. Who knows? That'll be this week's meme. Continuing on. Anyway, so looking at this, I do expect this to stay where it is or potentially attempt to push a little bit higher. It just seems to be holding. Treading water, it's really good. Looking at the DAX. DAX failed again this week, failed to get a little bit higher, broke, pushed back and closed actually even lower than last week. So not looking as strong, and it's got a monthly indecision candle. We are in the back end of January, and therefore this could lead to a bigger correction back down towards 14.8 as we head in towards February. So we'll have to see how that goes. It could even close a lot lower. So a little bit more caution cautious when it comes to that. Let's look at Euro stocks. Euro stocks also have started that bit of a correction. They've definitely got a level here of resistance, and let's just see if there's any divergence there. So we'll just reduce price. There is some divergence here. We've got a lower high, lower low, so that could be indicating exhaustion. I mean, it's obviously exhaustion. The price is talking about that. It's showing that. So let's see if it comes down and taps 475 this week. The Nikkei also looks like it wants to hit a little bit lower. Really not as much bullishness in this. There has to be something that comes out of nowhere that gives the markets a real boost. Maybe something like starting to see a micron dying down in the background and maybe just add a bit of jovialness. And then we can see we've got a bit of resistance that happens on the S&P. So that's also struggling a bit of an indecision candle here. Also not looking that strong on the 4. Okay, so all of this, I'm going to just kind of, this is very much what I would expect from last week to carry over here. Whereas here it's more undecided. Last week it did look like it was going to have a bit of a correction, and I would have expected bounces. Whereas this week, it looks undecided. It's looking as though it might hit a little bit lower as opposed to a correction. It's looking just inherently a little bit weak, but the UK is looking okay. So at this point, if everyone else is looking a little bit miserable and glum and the UK is looking a little bit strong, I think I'm going to lean towards the markets being just that bit weaker than they are, and we'll have to see if they can recover back from that. Okay, so moving on to the stocks of interest, so equities of interest, and let's have a look at Royal Mail. So here we go, struggling to get above this level, did really well here, breaking above 500, it's now back below that. Okay, we can see on the weekly here, bit of depletion, exhaustion here, now a bit of a correction there, and the monthly showing a bit of a potentially a lower high, so also not looking that strong there. That was a nice little performer. Amex. Okay, Amex having quite a bit of a bearish weekly candle there as well. Let's just kind of map this out a bit. And that monthly showing some exhaustion. Okay, these are not signs of strength. We'll see if we can continue. If in isolation, that wouldn't worry me. But all of this says there's a real barrier there. So in fact, so much so that I think it's fair for us to kind of just place something in there and see if you're able to get past that point. Okay, probably potentially 180 or down to 175. So in that area, it's really struggling. Let's see how that goes. Moving on to Apple. Okay, so how's Apple doing? All right, a lower high this week, a little bit of a bullish candle here. It might be able to push up again. 180 is clearly a problem for it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks where it's unable to get past 180. Okay, all right, so we might see, and then we've got a little bit of a kind of a bit of a 2 weeks here, so it's kind of tweezers type of impact there. Might be looking for a bit of a deeper correction. That's interesting to me. So what I'll be looking at here on Apple is the 4 hour. I'm looking to see if we break below that. And so this week could be, yeah, could be, yep, interesting. Okay, ARC. I've done a entirely separate technical analysis across just across all the ARC ETFs. I'll put the link up here, so you should be seeing it sort of flashing in the top window here. You can have a look at that. Very interesting. Well, I think you'll find it. I hope you'll find it very interesting. And then, so I've discussed that in more detail, but here my expectation is that it does still have, I almost said dildo, it does still almost have room to head a little bit down, but this is a good area where I potentially, if it is going to turn around, this is the area where I expect it to do that. AT&T. Okay, so it looks like AT&T are starting to clean up the act a little bit. They've had a relatively strong rebound, but they are now in an area where I think it's also fair to say they might be encountering some strong resistance. And so let's just see how that ultimately plays out. This is not an area where I'll be more impressed if they get past it. That was a decent recovery on a stock that is largely range bound. So it's not complete magic, but it was a better than expected bounce off that, and we'll see if they can. This is the area where we can see if they can get past it. But so far they have managed to get this week just past that 26 level. We'll see if they can stay the course. So it looks as though they've also instructed Direct TV to drop ON, which is a very smart move. And that is possibly has helped or contributed towards recovering customers. They were bleeding customers, and we'll see if that is going to be the case. So AT&T, Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway, you legend. Once again, Buffett shows that patience and keeping it simple and straightforward is the way to go. At some point, I'd like to see this come back and test this from the outside. So at some point, certainly the daily is entitled, or I would say would be encouraged to come back and test this and see if it can go back, if it's going to slip back into that range, come back and test this for support, but looking very nice and healthy. The real question is how is this monthly candle going to close? If it closes as a strong rejection, not a good sign for the entire market. If that's the case, if it manages to close as a sort of semi-bullish candle, that's still good. Okay, BP, very strong move here. We can see from crude oils, we could see that they're doing just fine. So they're looking okay, so they just look as though they're going to continue to the upside. I wouldn't expect more from that. Let's look at Exxon as well while we're at it. Same thing again. It's going to head up to the highs. This is a good area to see if it encounters some resistance, but this is certainly being propped up by a lot of those. Okay, back to Coca-Cola. Solid breakout, ladies and gentlemen. That is a beautiful, solid breakout. And again, similar to Berkshire Hathaway, and this is almost certainly added to BH's breakout there. This is looking good. Again, at some point, I need a breakout to come back and test these levels. All right, we'll see how that goes. ExxonMobil, also, as we just had a look at that, breaking out. General Motors, struggling. If this fails again here, I think there's a strong likelihood it's going to head down towards 50 or 40. So just taking note at that. JP Morgan Chase, that's not a great sign. It's more of a range-bound indecision battle. Bearish engulfing candle, not a good sign. It's got a level of support here around 150. I want to see if that holds. For this, it looks like there is a fair possibility of this to at least come down and test that level, maybe bounce off it again, or potentially hit a little bit lower, but it's also not looking that strong. Meta platforms, Meta's Facebook. For those of you who just might not be using Facebook anymore, that number's growing as well. But let's just have a look at this. Yeah, it's got a lot of buyers in this area. It's trying to stay above this 308 level, 300. If it drops through that, 250 is its next one. This candle's, January hasn't really gone anywhere. Now, I should say that seasonally, we can sometimes have a really nice boom before March and April and May, before the summer when everyone on the northern hemisphere tends to take some time off. So we could still have that. That could start to show itself. But for now, these are all looking a little bit wobbly. Morgan Stanley, again, still failing to get and stay above that 100 level. Also, bearish engulfing candle, very similar to JP Morgan, and also strong level of resistance up here. In fact, I think it's fair enough that we could put another level up there as well. It's really struggling a bit with that 105 level. So this one I expect it to come down, maybe bounce and tap that bottom level of the range. If the rest of the markets tend to break low, this could experience a bit of a break out to the downside. NVIDIA overall is doing everything very nice and normal. For me, I have to say I'm very attracted to this as a potential buying opportunity in this area here. So kind of somewhere around that. Let's have a look at that. So that up level 230 down towards 175. A really nice pullback down to this level would be very nice and healthy and produce a nice bullish candle over the next 2-3 months would be great. It's trying to hold where it is. So the question is, and that's a bit of an indecision candle, it might be able to recover back from that, but it does have a downtrend on the weekly. I would say that the attraction down towards this level is probably growing stronger and stronger by the day. Then we have PayPal. Ooh, okay, so PayPal, my buddy, yeah, we are really testing these levels. This area, look, it can come down to 150. There's no reason why I couldn't do that. It is certainly struggling. It's range bound at the moment. It might break lower this week. We'll have to see. It would have to break these highs first in order to break these highs before breaking the lows in order to convince me that it's looking more and more bearish. I hate to say this, but I don't necessarily know how much further it might have. It looks like to me 150 would probably be about that area. Let's have to see. We'll have to see how that goes. That's fine. And then we are on to Spider. So the Spider also having, that's a massively deep correction. This area, possibly even down to a little bit towards, say, 94, 95. This is a good area to see if that support holds. This is what I would like to see, is to see it produce a nice bullish candle off this level and to see if we get that this week. A break below this means it starts. It'll have a stop at about 90. Otherwise, it starts to head down towards 71, which is quite frightening as well. So there's a little area here around that 85 to 90 mark. We'll have to see how that goes. Okay, Tesla. So Tesla, obviously, Tesla being potentially overvalued. It's had, a heyday. That was a really good breakout. So really good breakout, which to me means, anywhere in this area, there's probably some really nice value. Again, I'm going to update this one. I have to update this. So let's just update this to kind of include a little bit around that area. Oop, there we go. Actually, a little bit higher. It can have a correction further than that. Anything is possible. It's struggling at this point in time. The real kind of sign of any kind of danger would be a break below, kind of below this 900 level, hitting down a little bit further down towards 600 would actually be the next level. And so this is what I want to see this week. Is it going to come down and tap 900, or is it able to produce a bit of a bullish candle closer to that 1-2 level? We'll see. Again, it's kind of at this point is sort of a little bit on its own. And then we've got Vanguard. so far doing really, really good, but this price action is starting to show a bit of bearish divergence. Let's have a look at that. Let's reduce the price. Bearish divergence there as well. So this one is hinting at the very real possibility that it may, let's have a look at that. It's still bullish, but we'll have to see if it then breaks below that level there. So this could attempt another move up to 440. We'll have to see if that's the case. Alternatively, this is its real kind of challenge. If it falls through that, it's down towards 400. So I guess, yeah, we're going to have to see how that goes. I guess from a trader's perspective, from an intraday or day trading perspective, it just means huge amounts of caution. There's not a lot of major news out in the markets at this time. Currencies are going to be a little bit wobbly. Crude oils are looking fantastic. Gold, and they might start to push a little bit higher. There might then be some trends in those. Some of the other commodities are kind of mixed and matched. The indices are going to be, and equities are going to be, to my mind, very high risk. They're not creating any new highs. They're sitting between their recent highs and potentially range bound or heading a little bit low, which makes them just incredibly high risk to trade. Okay, let's have a look at Treasuries. Bonds starting to break a little bit low. Had a bit of an indecision candle here. Might find its way back up, but that daily still looks a little bit more bearish than anything else. That 4-hourly testing those levels of support. The EURUSD, these are starting to halt. So we've got some indecision candles here, which could mean that these are going to start to bounce up a little bit. So if we do see the markets fall a little bit low, we might see some of these treasuries start to recover a little bit and start to head up towards the highs. This is sitting right at the edge of a bit of level, and this could be potentially a bearish breakout. Let's take it from there. So this could be a breakout to the downside. It is largely range bound. Again, a recovery from this off that would be an interesting signal from treasuries. Okay, Bitcoin, cryptos. Cryptos are going to struggle if equities take a tumble. They just are. They're going to be swimming upstream. It's really hard for them. That's a nice little bullish candle here overall. I'm going to do a separate video on Bitcoin this week. It's not a crash. People like to refer to it as a Bitcoin crash. It's just because the swings are so big that it feels like a crash. Overall, the trend is still an uptrend of high lows, high highs. It's just that it kind of, because it's got such a large contingent of amateurs involved in it, and I don't actually mean that as an insult. I just mean that a large contingent would be, say, retail traders and investors, that there's a lot of people watching it, and the big swings are very big for them, and it's quite wild. And so they'll call a move from here down to here a crash when it's more of a correction. But it is struggling. It's more range bound than anything else, and therefore, because it is range bound, it dropped down to 30,000. 40,000 are your major levels. A drop below 40,000 means 30,000 is kind of falls in line. All of that is a possibility, and if the rest of the equities do take a tumble, it's almost certainly going to be an option for this to head a little bit low. But I see these more for myself. This is not financial advice. None of my stuff is financial advice. For me, these are more buying opportunities at these discounted levels. They are not a reflection of where I think this is likely to go in the long run. I'll talk about that more in the video that I'm going to produce this week. Ethereum. This is in a really good place. Ethereum is looking good. That's a little bit of a bullish pattern here. That's a nice bit of a higher low here. So what could happen here with Ethereum is it could attempt to go a little bit higher. If everything else gets dragged down, it might take a bit of a tumble, but I could see that it is attempting to stay a little bit higher than it is. We've got Neo. This is right down at the bottom. Most of these have depleted a lot of their, or given a lot of their value back, and therefore there's not much further for them to go. It's got a nice little uptrend, a beautiful break, and a retest of support here. So to me, Neo kind of is roughly where it's going to be. Cardano is looking really good. That's a very nice monthly bullish candle. Nice little test of support here. So Cardano is looking good. Ethereum's looking good. Ripple, this could turn out to be an inside bullish candle. It's also given back quite a bit of its value, and then we've got Dogecoin, which is sitting near the lows here. So it's quite interesting. Effectively, just Bitcoin aside, a lot of these look pretty good. They look as though they're stabilizing kind of where they are. That might help prop up Bitcoin. We might find that these become a new type of, or a bit of an alternative investment, and therefore there's a bit of money flowing that way. That could be the case. And taking that into account, the drop on Bitcoin might not ultimately happen. It might find some support here. I'm just saying that if I hadn't looked at any of the others, there was a very real possibility of it heading a little bit low. So again, for me, that means caution. There isn't really an uptrend in place to become a buyer in this, to be a bull. It is exercising caution. I need to see a stronger recovery before I then decide to start getting involved as a buyer. Alternatively, there are real possibilities there that 4-hour breaks below the low, and I start to see bearish moves on the others, which have already leveled out. If they continue to look bearish when they shouldn't be, then I would expect further moves to the downside. That's it. That's all from me. I want to wish you a fantastic week. And I think this week calls for extra caution and patience.